At See's Candy, we sell directly to the consumer, but at Kraft Heinz, they're intermediaries. And those intermediaries are trying to make money. We're trying to make money. And the brand is our protection against the intermediaries making all the money. Costco tried to drop Coca-Cola back in, I think, 2008. And you can't drop Coca-Cola, and not disappoint a lot of customers. Snickers bars are the number one candy that Mars makes them. And they've been number one, I think, for 30 or 40 years. And if you walk into a drugstore and the guy says, I've got the Snickers is 75 cents or whatever it might be, and I've got this special little bar we make, my wife and I make in the back of the store, and it's only 50 cents and it's just as good. You don't buy it. When you're at some other place, the next time you buy the Snickers bar. So brands can be enormously valuable, but many of the brands are dependent, most of them. Geico is not. Geico goes directly to the consumer. If we save the consumer money on insurance, they're going to buy it from us. And our brand, and we'll spend well over $1.5 billion on advertising this year. And you think, my God, we started this in 1936 and we were saying the same thing then about saving 15% in 15 minutes or something. It was not exactly the same, but that brand is huge, and we have to come through on the promise we give, which is to save people significant money on insurance, a great many people. That brand is huge, and we're dealing directly with the consumer. And when you're selling Kool-Aid or ketchup or Heinz 57 sauce or something, you are going through a channel, and they would, as the phrase was used earlier today, our gross margin is their opportunity, and we think that the ultimate consumer is going to force them to have our product, and that we will get the gross margin. And that fight, that tension, has increased in the last 5 years, and I think it's likely to increase in the next 5 or 10 years. And Charlie is a director of a company that has caused me to think a lot about that subject.
You were quoted as stating that you recognize that Berkshire overpaid for Kraft Heinz. Clearly, major retail chains are being more aggressive in developing house brands. In addition, Amazon has announced intentions to launch grocery outlets, meaning that, as Mr. Bezos has often stated, your margin is my opportunity. Will traditional consumer good brands in general, and Kraft Heinz in particular, have any moat in their future? My question is, to what extent do the changing dynamics in the consumer food market change your view on the long-term potential for Kraft Heinz?
Yeah, actually what I said was we paid too much for Heinz. I mean Kraft, I'm sorry. The Heinz part of the transaction, when we originally owned about half of Heinz, we paid an appropriate price there, and we actually did well. We had some preferred redeemed and so on. We paid too much money for Kraft. To some extent, our own actions had driven up the prices. Now, Kraft Heinz, the profits of that business, $6 billion, we'll say very, very, very roughly. I'm not projecting them out. I'm not making forecasts, but $6 billion pre-tax on $7 billion of tangible assets is a wonderful business. But you can pay too much for a wonderful business. We bought See's Candy, and we made a great purchase as it turned out, and we could have paid more. But there's some price at which we could have bought even See's Candy, and it wouldn't have worked. So the business does not know how much you paid for it. I mean, it's going to earn based on its fundamentals, and we paid too much for the Kraft side of Kraft Heinz. Additionally, the profitability has basically been improved in those operations over the way they were operating before. But you're quite correct that Amazon itself has become a brand. Kirkland at Costco is a $39 billion brand. Now, all of Kraft Heinz does $26 billion, and it's been around for, on the Heinz side, it's been around for 150 years. It's been advertised billions and billions of dollars in terms of their products, and they go through tens of thousands of outlets. And here's somebody like Costco establishes a brand called Kirkland, and it's doing $39 billion, more than virtually any food company. And that brand moves from product to product, which is terrific if a brand travels. I mean, Coca-Cola moves it from Coke to Cherry Coke and Coke Zero and so on. But to have a brand that can really move, and Kirkland does more business than Coca-Cola does. And Kirkland operates through 775 or so stores. They call them warehouses at Costco, and Coca-Cola's through millions of distribution outlets. So brands, the retailer and the brands have always struggled as to who gets the upper hand in moving a product to the consumers. And there's no question in my mind that the position of the retailer relative to the brands, which varies enormously around the world in different countries, you've had 35%, even maybe 40% be private label brands in soft drinks, and it's never gotten anywhere close to that in the United States. So it varies a lot. But basically certain retailers, the retail system has gained some power, and particularly in the case of Amazon and Walmart and their reaction to it, and Costco, and Aldi and some others I can name, has gained in power relative to brands. Kraft Heinz is still doing very well operationally, but we paid too much. We paid $50 billion, it would have been a different business. It'd still be earning the same amount. You can turn any investment into a bad deal by paying too much. What you can't do is turn any investment into a good deal by paying little, which is sort of how I started out in this world. But the idea of buying the cigar butts that are declining or poor businesses for a bargain price is not something that we try to do anymore. We try to buy good businesses at a decent price, and we made a mistake on the craft part of Kraft Heinz. Charlie?
Well, it's not a tragedy that out of two transactions, one worked wonderfully and the other didn't work so well. That happens.
Reduction in costs, there can always be mistakes made when you've got places and you're reorganizing them to do more business with the same number of people. And we like buying businesses that are efficient to start with, but the management, the operations of Kraft Heinz have been improved under the present management overall. But we paid a very high price in terms of the Kraft part. We paid an appropriate price in terms of Heinz.
Hello, Warren and Charlie. Consumer tastes are changing. I think if we asked how many people here in the arena have eaten Velveeta cheese in the last year or so, there'd be only a small handful, maybe more for Jell-O. 3G's playbook of cutting R&D looks to have stifled new product development amidst changing preferences. So here's my question. Why continue to hold when the moat appears to be dry, or do you think it is filling back up?
Well, I don't think the problem was that they cut research or something. I think the problem was they paid a little too much for the last acquisition.
Yeah, Jell-O, I can't give you the exact figure. There's certain brands that may be declining 2% a year, 3% a year in unit sales, and there's others that are growing 1 or 2%. There's not dramatic changes taking place at all. I mean, Kraft Heinz is earning more money than Kraft were earning 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, and the products are being used in a huge way. Now, it's true that there are always trends going to some degree, but they have not fallen apart remotely. And they have widened the margins somewhat, but it is tougher in terms of the margin and the price negotiations, probably to go through to the actual consumer. That's become a somewhat tougher passageway for all food companies than it was 10 years ago. It's still a terrific business. I mean, you mentioned Jell-O or Velveeta. Charlie works at my grandfather's grocery store in 1940. I worked there in 41. And if they were buying those products then, they buy the products now. The margins are still very good. They earn terrific returns on invested capital. But we paid too much in the case of Kraft. You can pay too much for a growing brand. I mean, you can pay way too much for a growing brand. Probably easier to be sucked into that. So I basically don't worry about the brands. Certain of them are very strong, and certain of them are declining a bit. But that was the case 10 years ago. It'll be the case 10 years from now. But there's nothing dramatic happening in that.